Hello, my name is Santiago, and in today's opportunity, we will be reading another article from Harvard Business Review. Uh, this time, I try to bring like a different topic. It is still related to companies and organizations. However, it is a bit different since we will be talking not about people, we will be talking about like the products. And this is why, or the article that we will be checking today is called Ensuring Your Products Aren't Used for Discrimination. Um, this was written by Michael Luca, Elizabeth Pronkina, and Michelangelo Rossi. It was posted on October 10 from last year, 2022. So let's get started with it. Crises often lead people to look of someone to blame, and the blame often lands on marginalized ethnic or religious groups. Tragic events lead to Japanese internment camps during World War II and the anti-Muslim sentiment in the wake of 9/11. In the context of COVID-19, our ongoing research has found that the racial scapegoating and the anti-Asian sentiment during the early stage of the pandemic caused both emotional and economical damage. Looking at the hundreds of thousands of bookings on Airbnb, we find that there was a peak of discrimination against Asian American Airbnb users early in the pandemic. Business leaders need to be aware of this risk. They also need tools to identify, measure, and mitigate bias, and the proactive approach that anticipates and identifies discrimination. In this article, we provide an overview of our research, focusing on Airbnb as a case of a study when we then provide a framework for leaders to help create environments that are less susceptible to bias. So the first one is recent discrimination against Asian Americans. We analyze data from inside Airbnb and a project that provides data and advocacy about Airbnb's impacts on residential communities. We studied that more than 300,000 Airbnbs across a 1,700,000 hosts. We use statistical algorithms to infer host race based on their names, an approach that we have proposed as part of Toolkit for measuring discrimination on platforms, and which is now used by companies such as Uber. We combine this with granular data on listing characteristics, prices, and booking information. The results were striking. We identified a large and rapid spike in discrimination against Asian American hosts spanning 2020. While all hosts were affected by pandemic, the impact of Asian American hosts was much higher related to white hosts, Hispanic hosts, and black hosts. Our results suggest that the spikes in discrimination caused Asian American hosts to lose about 12% of their guests during the pandemic. One explanation for this decline could be that Asian American hosts were more selective out of fear of the risk of contracting the virus. However, our results were consistent even among instantly bookable hosts who automatically accept all booking inquiries, suggesting that any drops in bookings related to other instant bookings properties can be attributed to guest decisions. Sorry, here. So we found that discrimination was widespread, affecting both newer and more experienced hosts, and leads to a drop in business, even for Asian American hosts with strong reputations on the platform. In contrast, Black or Hispanic American hosts did not experience any significant drop in business during the pandemic, related to white hosts. The reduction in the number of guests is only evident for Asian American hosts, the main scapegoated group during the COVID-19 pandemic. Long before the COVID 19 pandemic, there was evidence of discrimination on Airbnb. Research by one of us, Mike, joined with the collaborators Ben Edelman and Diane Sprinsky, documented the discrimination against African American hosts and guests. This research started more than 8 years ago and kickstart a new body of literature documenting and providing tools to combat discrimination in online markets. Discriminatory behaviors are facilitated in part by the presence of information that reveals race, most typically names or photos. Airbnb has recently faced lawsuits from users who have experienced discriminations based on their name, a possibility that has been raised in our early research. More broadly, in context, ranging from online marketplaces to hiring process, removing such markets when discrimination occurs has been approached to mitigate bias. And let's just move on. Airbnb has taken important steps in the right direction. After 2015, Airbnb began removing host photos from the main search results pages, and in 2018, it removed host ability to view guest photos until after booking decisions are made. However, host pictures and names are still showing in listed pages, which is what we believe led to the spike in discrimination we document in on our research. Building a more inclusive business ecosystem. Business leaders must take steps to ensure that their business and product decisions don't facilitate discrimination. Fortunately, there is a growing toolkit for leaders who want to create a more inclusive company and society. Here we laid out 4 steps every leader should take to work towards this goal. The first one is don't deny that discrimination has, oh, sorry, don't deny that discrimination has occurred if it has. Leaders must recognize that prejudice, I'm sorry, it is still pervasive in modern society and that they can play a role in helping to understand and reduce bias. This begins by thinking through how this might manifest within your organization. How might prejudice affect your customers, your employees, and your operations? How are your decisions going to exacerbate or mitigate discrimination? It is also important to understand that the prejudice evolves. During times of crisis, it is especially important to think about the types of bias that might be on the rise as well. Airbnb was surprised by our most recent results and has committed to further exploration of the issue. After this project, Mike got a call from a senior consultant to the company asking why we thought they should do. It can be difficult to anticipate the evolving discrimination landscape, and there are executives at Airbnb who seem genuinely interested in reducing discrimination on the platform, but they might be have identified this issue earlier had they recognized the rise of anti-Asian sentiment and how this could impact their platform. The second one is measure discrimination when possible, of course. It can be painful for companies to look into the mirror and think about the discrimination that is occurring within their organizations, whether in their hiring or their platforms. Yet, this is important. This is an important step in addressing discrimination. In our analysis of Airbnb, we measure discrimination on the platforms by looking at host names. Other approaches include coding photos, which Mike did in 2014, a study conducted by Benjamin Edelman and again in a later project, and surveying users to understand their ethnicity. Companies can also look at complaints they receive. For instance, after earlier research, Mike received an email from an Airbnb user who described being discriminated against on Airbnb. His complaint was dismissed by Airbnb's customer service department. Instead, they should have acknowledged it and been systematically looking at whether there are broader patterns of discrimination in the complaints. The third way to fight discrimination on your company is make your company as discrimination proof as possible. A growing set of tools has been developed in recent years aimed at reducing bias in different contexts. In some cases, this can involve increasing anonymity. For instance, in the context of Airbnb. This will involve showing the identity of guests and host, only after a booking decision is made. A solution we have proposed and studied over the years. This can also involve careful of use of automatization and algorithmic decision aids. This has to be done thoughtfully as algorithms also have the potential to reinforce or exacerbate biases as well. And companies can think about the design of their ecosystems more broadly, focusing on designing inclusive process for everything from hiring and promotion to the platform experience and product design. The fourth way to fight the discrimination when it comes to your product or your organization is experiment with and refine your processes. It is tempting to think about discriminations as a one time problem to solve, but addressing these complex issues is an ongoing process, not a problem that can be fixed all at once. Here, experimentation can help leaders to develop frameworks to reduce discrimination over time and to respond to ongoing challenges. Companies need to bake the possibility of discrimination into their experimental analysis. When products change are made, they should, as a matter of course, think through the effect, not only on short-term productivity metrics, which are commonly tracked and evaluated, but also on inclusivity metrics and whether the change increased a bias. Leaders can think of this as putting wardrobes in place. On top of this, they should use experiments to test out different ideas to see which ones are most effective at reducing discrimination. Here, we will point to Airbnb's ongoing experiment in Oregon. When guests based in the state request to book a property, the host only sees the prospective guest initials and opposed to their full name. For instance, a booking request from Jamal Smith and a booking request from James Smith will both be shown as a booking request from JS. This experiment came in response to a lawsuit in which three users accused the platform of discrimination while there are limitations to design of the experiment. This moves in the right decision of systematically testing and implementing strategies to reduce bias. Business leaders cannot simply sit on the sidelines when it comes to addressing social issues. Societal issues are business issues, whether focusing on the design of a platform or employee management. Leaders need to create a robust ecosystem anticipating the potential for discrimination. If an organization is susceptible to discrimination before crisis, it will be more difficult to contain the spread of discrimination when crises in racial tensions inevitably occur in the world. And when crisis hit, leaders need to step into action and respond as quick as possible. And so, basically, this is like the end of the article. Um, just to add like a few more minutes to the presentations before I start with the resume in Spanish. Um I think that it is really important to recognize some important parts of the article. Just to do like a quick review, and I would like to also read the summary to refresh a little bit more about what or author Michael Luca, Elizabeth Prokina, and Michelangelo Rossi were trying to say when they write this in October 10th of 2022. That is basically discrimination is both a societal and business issue. That is basically what I mentioned at the end. And the extent to which discrimination is allowed to affect company is a decision that is made by business leaders. Fortunately, there is a growing toolkit for leaders who want to create a more inclusive company and society here. The authors lay out four steps every leader should take to work towards this goal. Ahora sí, básicamente, la traducción del título de este artículo es asegurándote de que tus productos no sean usados para discriminación. Es básicamente como una crítica basada en el estudio que realizó este grupo de personas a la compañía Airbnb, que es esta compañía la cual presta el servicio de casas, habitaciones, estudios, hoteles, experiencias, la cual ha tomado muchísima fuerza últimamente en el mercado. Entonces, en el artículo básicamente nos están contando, nos están relatando los resultados del estudio que ellos realizaron inicialmente, iniciando y terminando la pandemia, ¿cierto? Eh, Básicamente nos cuentan de que las personas que tenían, que eran asiático-estadounidenses o tenían como tal raíces asiáticas, pues sufrieron un 18% más de discriminación, un 18 no, un 12% si no estoy mal, un 12% más de discriminación y afectación económica frente a las personas normales. eh, o de otro tipo de racialidad, normales no, disculpen esa palabra, no es la adecuada para este contexto. Me refiero a personas de otras nacionalidades, por ejemplo, los latinos, las personas negras o las personas blancas, nos hablan exclusivamente de esas personas. Y aquí es importante mencionar el tema de que de las personas de racialidad asiáticas pues sufrieron un 12% de afectación durante la pandemia, lo cual si nos ponemos a ver a una escala mucho más grande pues nos damos cuenta de que en Estados Unidos a la hora del estudio pues estudiaron 300.000 Airbnbs, ¿cierto? O sea, 300.000 habitaciones o locaciones en las cuales se pudieron establecer estas personas. Entonces nos cuentan de que las personas de una racialidad asiática pues sufrieron esta afectación eh, básicamente y solamente basado en cómo se veían o de dónde venían o de dónde eran sus ancestros, ¿ciertos? Entonces, básicamente lo que nos menciona el artículo son cuatro pasos que nos van a ayudar a construir espacios de negocios mucho más saludables cuando estamos hablando de inclusividad. La primera es básicamente que no niegues que la discriminación ha ocurrido, sí ha ocurrido, obviamente. Eh, Básicamente nos cuenta de cómo Airbnb fue denunciado, dado a que una persona como tal está denunciando un tema de discriminación a la línea de soporte, pero no fue escuchada y el caso fue cerrado. Por lo tanto, recibieron una demanda a Airbnb en este caso, ¿cierto? Entonces, básicamente nos habla de que es importante reconocer de que hay discriminación, de que si ha ocurrido es importante reconocerla y no pasarla de lado, sino realmente reconocerla, ¿cierto? La segunda llave o la segunda estrategia es mide la discriminación cuando es posible, ¿cierto? Conocemos que estas empresas como tal tienen grandes fuentes de data y básicamente nos cuenta de cómo Airbnb ha trabajado de la mano de las personas de este equipo pues para trabajar esa medida y cómo experimentalmente pueden empezar a trabajar en reducir el número de discriminación basado en racialidad como tal o en etnia. La tercera es, haz tu compañía eh, antidiscriminación o que básicamente cuando hablamos de proof, ¿cierto? Estamos hablando, por ejemplo, una mascarilla waterproof que traduce como a prueba de discriminación. Asegúrate que tu compañía sea a prueba de discriminación as possible, o sea, lo más posible que puedas hacer. Y básicamente esto se hace asegurándote de que tu compañía como tal tenga un environment o un espacio saludable en el cual las personas como sean conscientes de que hay discriminación y de que no es algo que realmente pues deba como tal permanecer, ¿cierto? Y pues la última nos habla de experiment with and refine your processes, que es básicamente experimenta y refina tus procesos o afina tus procesos, creo que sería como la traducción correcta. Entonces aquí nos hablan de que pues Airbnb contactó a las personas que escribieron el artículo, preguntándoles qué creen que ellos deberían hacer. Entonces ahí se entró la conversación de que si la foto de los hosts o de los guests pues debería aparecer desde el inicio cuando buscan la propiedad o si debería aparecer cuando ya el pago haya sido hecho y cómo se están planteando esas estrategias para disminuir como tal la discriminación, ¿cierto? Y reconocen eh, de que algunas personas importantes de las mesas directivas de Airbnb como tal se están preocupando de que estas conversaciones se tengan inicialmente, pues de nuevo, para evitar lo mayor posible, pues el tema de discriminación cuando tienes una compañía. Básicamente esto es lo que nos comentaba este artículo. Muchísimas gracias por escucharlo eh, y que tengan un buen día.